Welcome to What's Your Reel? This is a podcast where we interview with industry-leading creatives to learn their story about who they are, how they got there, and where they want to go. We invite you to join us on the journey as we roll their reel to learn how these creatives are finding their way to success.
That was good.
Yeah, I can't believe you did that off the dome, to be honest.
That was right off the cuff.
All right,
Andy.
thanks.
It was funny, too, because
Sick.
at the beginning, he was acting like as if he didn't have that completely memorized.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't remember the first word.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. That's
Welcome.
unbelievable.
You crushed that. Nice job. Nice job.
Lucas,
Yes, sir.
dude, okay, so I've never met you,
Yep.
but I'm stoked that you're here. We have dirt bikes in common and
sure.
filmmaking in common,
Yep.
which, I mean, this is going to be an awesome conversation. But to get us rolling, introduce yourself.
So I am Lucas Zelazny. What do? I own a couple different companies. I own a company called Outsource Creative that is in its relative infancy, and a gym, which used to be like a holistic wellness center in South Burlington, Vermont. I am a half Vermonter. I grew up for the first half of my childhood in Connecticut, moved here when I was 13, went to Mount Mansfield, went to UVM for athletic medicine, got my bachelor's degree there, and then have since had a profession or a career in fitness and medicine until very recently due to the coronavirus pandemic, in which I've made a complete industry shift over to the media side of things, which is something I enjoy a significant amount more than treating patients and training athletes. And yeah, super into dirt bikes. I love motors. I'm a big time adrenaline junkie. And I've been hurt a lot. So
They don't like you as much as you like them. Yeah.
So the athletic medicine side, that was, that was brought on by all of the injuries that I've had over the years. But I've always been, I would say I've always been a creative at heart. Used to draw when I was a kid. I've always had a camera in my hand in some capacity. And then through the stuff that we did at Concept, because as I started that business, I was like, I want to have a really strong media presence. So we've always had media people involved in the company, whether it's graphic designers, photographers, videographers, web designers, audio people, whatever. And because I was so kind of emphatic about the marketing side of things and the branding of that business, social media and utilizing that as a strategy to get new leads for the company, we just always had these people circulating and helping us. So fast forward 5 years, the coronavirus hits us. We can't afford all of that media production. We have to keep our heads above water. And since I've been around it for so long, I was like, I'm gonna take this as an opportunity to really learn the ins and outs of how to properly use a camera and proper composition, how to render files differently, etc. And then format things for social, format things for YouTube, like whatever. And then I had been doing that for Concept for about a year through the pandemic. And then I was like, I'm going to start delivering this service to other companies. And so that's where we are now. We've worked with 18 different organizations since the company was created, 12 of which are on retainer. And we do photo production, or photo, video production, web design, graphic design, logo creation. I'm getting more into sound design. That's something that I'm really interested in. And yeah, that's where everything's at today.
How many people are on your team?
It's me, Amy, and then we're trying to bring on our buddy Colby Sears, who is just an operations and logistical genius, to help on like the consulting side of things from like a brand strategy standpoint and whatnot. And that's it. It's just the three of us. Amy does all of our copywriting. She's an amazing writer, which is a big piece of marketing in general and website development and things of that nature. And then Concept, I had 25 employees there, and recently we just did like a complete shift over to like the more traditional independent contractor model, and we are offering a 24/7 membership. So we got a new door installed, and we have key cards for people to come in and use the facility whenever they want.
That's cool.
And then Concept is just acting as like a client of Outsourced Creative. So we're trying to keep it going. We like exercise. I'm always hurt, so it's nice to have somewhere to go and do my rehab and train with people. And then, we're just getting a lot of new gigs with the media side, and I'm trying to just get better and better at the things I like to do. I'm definitely more attracted to video than I am photo, just because I think that creatively you can be a lot more dynamic with the things that you produce comparatively. So plus it seems like that's the way the world is trending, right? Like everybody's attention spans are like, I gotta see movement and motion and video to keep my attention. Like if you put one photo in front of my face, I'll be like, cool.
Swipe.
Yeah, that's it.
It's actually amazing because even myself, I've been noticing that recently where like I'm not a TikTok guy, but Instagram Reels have ruined me. Like it is the perfect recipe for scrolling forever.
You get sucked into a vortex, and TikTok is better. That's the thing. Don't get a TikTok if you don't want to get stuck, because it's crazy. I mean, they've just figured it out. The algorithms are insane. The ease of swiping through stuff, just like, and it's not like you scroll and you see text and white space and then you roll on to the next thing. It's just like immediate in your face, just like crazy. I can't believe it. And it's all the other thing that I've noticed, right? And some of the things that we're looking at with our company is because technology has gone so far, and like we're sitting here filming with all these like high production cameras and all of this stuff. And I myself do a lot more on the commercial side of things, right? And we're not just making like random like cool movies. We're doing like commercials for organizations and stuff. People are more attracted to like raw, like unformatted content that's just like not curated. And that's a really big shift, because I'm like, well, no, it looks like shit. Like,
dude, I have a short rant.
Yeah, just go for it.
Like, okay, so you know me, I make a ton of vlogs. That's kind of like my thing now, which is very weird to say because it never was. I did commercials for local companies for years and all this stuff. Now, I did this. Okay, a lot of backstory really quick. We have this app, AJ and I have this app that we're running where it's like a subscription fee to be a part of the app, but we have hundreds of members and all this stuff. And it's kind of exclusive, right? So like I've been kind of toying with that audience, if you will, because, you know, typically if you're paying to be in somebody's like club, you're like a fan and you take it seriously and you're somewhat normal. So I put out there, I'm like, all right, guys, I want to know in these videos, in these YouTube videos, music or no music, which dirt bike riders especially are pretty opinionated about. And everybody was like, yeah, strip the music, all this stuff. And I made an edit without music just to try it. I was like, let's try it. And for me, I was like, wow, this is the most boring video ever. And everybody loved it. And I'm like, gosh, that makes me mad. Like,
just put so much time and energy.
Yeah, it's like
meeting the cuts to the sound of the audio, all that jazz.
Yeah, and it's like if you don't do that, they're like, "Oh yeah, that's great." I'm like, "What?" Yeah. But that's just like the YouTube and social media culture. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, it's so weird. But what I was saying earlier is like with Instagram and scrolling and whatever. Yeah, I'm way less interested in photos now.
Oh yeah.
Like Instagram, I remember when Instagram brought videos on, I was mad because I was like, oh, you're going to ruin Instagram.
Right.
And now like the photos on Instagram are like the lame part.
I know, it's crazy. Like the way that I've combated that is with like the continuous sliding carousels where you go into Photoshop, you take like a panoramic or you merge a few different images and then you splice it to those like 1350 by 1080 proportions. And so that you can swipe through and it's like a continuation of the same photo. But if you just post like one photo nowadays, like to your point, it's like, okay, cool. Like I've seen a million Getty images that look exactly the same of like this fall landscape or whatever. It's just not special anymore.
Yeah, no, exactly, dude. And I noticed you've been doing a lot of those. You know, I stalked your Instagram a little bit. And I've never done those, but they always look kind of sick.
panoramic style.
I love those. Yeah.
Yeah. And you kind of like, for lack of, you got to tell me the word here, but they're almost like collage.
Graphically.
Kind of.
Yeah.
You know, like
I think you can just tell like a story a little bit better. Another thing that I've been doing with our photos is doing like super high shutter shots where we almost make like a stop motion video, or we do make a stop motion video. That way I can show up to a client and charge a photo rate, and then we'll take like 25 shots that are just like super fast, and then we'll just put them all in Premiere Pro and run it with some music, which is a great way to not have to charge an absorbent amount for video production work for these clients that might not necessarily be able to afford it. Just to make your photos more dynamic. But same thing. Yeah. We're like clipping to the audio and like whatever. And I actually haven't, this is like on me. I need to do a better job, but I haven't posted a lot of our stuff that I make, on Outsource Creative, because I'm so focused on all these other companies that we work with, which I need to do a better job with from a marketing standpoint, because people don't necessarily know what my style is yet. So I've been going, we're revamping our website a little bit. I got to update all the different clients that we've had on there. We're doing a lot more video production, which is cool. I really like shooting like brand videos, and vlogs. I'm super interested in vlogs. I would love to do that shit.
Yeah, it's fun.
And then, just figuring out, where are we going to put that stuff and how is it going to benefit the client? Because it's like, I think for us, finding that balance, right, of overproducing versus just taking an iPhone clip and posting that on social. It's like, well, you can do that. Why would you pay a company to like make that for you? But that's like what people want. It's wild, because especially as this new generation comes up and in the Gen Zers, like I'm a young millennial, I would say. I'm born in 93. So I'm kind of on that tweener. Like I remember freaking landline phones, but I've had a cell phone since I was like 10 or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's interesting because people see those like high produced things on social, which is where all of the businesses are, because it's the cheapest way to get your stuff in front of people. And they're like, oh, that looks too good. That looks too ad-like. It looks too good for me. Like, I don't want to see that. I want to see like the random TikTok dance that everybody's like trending with. It's like, okay, how are we going to address that as a landscaping company or as a real estate agent or like whatever? It's like, okay, well.
So is that something that you have conversations with your clients a lot about, saying like how do you sell, hey, I'm going to make you something that doesn't look polished?
Yeah, no,
I
know. So the way that we have structured things, and it's changing a little bit now, because like just the dynamic of media in general is changing. But when we first started back in August of 2020, it was straight up like, I'm going to show up with a camera and I'm just going to document for an hour, like what you guys do on a day-to-day basis. And then we're going to take those image files and we're going to post for you 5 times a week on social. And we're just going to do it organically. And then, maybe we'll take our favorite one and we'll run it as like a page likes campaign on Facebook, just as a means to stay relevant, right? And to stay top of mind. I call it touch points for our clients. So 7 to 12 touches, right? Somebody will likely buy from you from not knowing you at all. And so the idea of the content that we're producing is getting people to know, like, and trust you. It's developing an online portfolio. It goes onto your website, which is where you're going to land. And then just showing like what you guys do on a daily basis consistently so that you stay top of mind. So if somebody's like, oh, you should check out this landscaping company or this real estate team or this nail salon or this PT clinic or wherever it is. And then the algorithm changed, and then all the privacy stuff changed with the iOS 14 update. And so advertising completely changed, and we were just like, oh my God. And then this summer, like Instagram comes out and is like, we're no longer a photo platform, is basically what they said.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, well, we're still charging, show up for an hour and do like a couple hours of editing and then post. And that's how we're charging for our services still. And we can't anymore because the dynamic of everything has changed so much in a year, right? Like ads are completely different. There's a whole R&D component of things. Like creators are learning how to navigate like the new landscape of social. And then one of the biggest frustrations that I see is like everybody wants Facebook and everybody wants Instagram, and they're completely differently formatted. So I have to like consider that when I'm shooting too, because I'm like, I just want to shoot in landscape, but everything's got to be fucking converted into portrait mode. So it's like, and then that's additional work, right? Where you're like changing your sequence settings and whatever. So that's kind of where we're at. It's like, we need to produce more video. How do we do that in a cost-effective way for these clients that are anywhere from like a sole proprietorship to like a 35-person organization, right? But they don't want to spend $100,000 a year on a marketing director who's going to give them half as much because that person's not going to do the creative. And so it's trying to figure out that dynamic while understanding that I'm relatively new in the industry. So you don't want to like, I'm not going to overcharge. I'm not going to charge as much as somebody like you with a $25,000 red camera, right? But my Sonys are pretty sick. They work.
Yeah, no, they're great.
So I shoot with an A7 III, and then I have a A6600 crop frame, which is awesome. I just slap it on a gimbal and it just goes for it. All shoots 4K.
A gimbal, that's awfully high production value, don't you think?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So it's been fun, and just, you know, using simple equipment to make cool stuff is kind of what we're doing for companies. And what Amy likes to say is like, we take your brand and something that might not necessarily be interesting to a lot of people, and we try to make it look interesting. We try to make, you know, somebody doing like nail removal look super sick because you're doing slow-mo like capture at 120 frames per second and the dust is flying off of it and there's music in the background and whatever. But if you're like sitting there in real time just recording with an iPhone, it's like zzz, it sounds like you're at the dentist's office. And so we try to incorporate like both aspects, right? So that I would say the consumer isn't like, oh, they're trying way too hard, versus like, oh, that looks really cool and good. So we try to kind of mix things in. And we will post just those random iPhone shots that people take. But I'm such a perfectionist that I have a really hard time like when people send me stuff and they're like, doesn't this look so good? And I'm just like, yeah, totally. I'm like,
for sure.
Because we're representing ourselves, right, with their media, with their social. Like, so I don't want to show their social to a client and then be like, oh, well, why doesn't it look like high production? And then we just explain it to people. You know, this is what people are looking for. We want to mix in like more like kind of raw content. Peter McKinnon talks a lot about that too. I don't know if you guys saw the video where he like has like that gold like French coffee press, and he does one with an iPhone and one with like I think his Mark IV, and you're just like, yeah, the difference is crazy. And video stuff now, I'm really curious to see what's going to happen with like templates and these little apps where you just like take random videos with your phone. You have no idea what settings you're using because everything's on auto, and you slap them into these things that just create these like edits for you. And it's like, oh my God, okay, well, like a 13-year-old can do that and make a pretty cool video. So
yeah, looping back to like Instagram Reels, those are some really powerful edits.
Yeah.
A lot of people do from their phone. It's incredible.
In the Instagram platform.
Yeah.
Because you can splice and cut and do music overlays and sound effects and all kinds of different things. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's very interesting. So like, just relating to it a little bit, I had a drone, man, I would have been 16 or 17, and it broke, and I was like, I'm never buying another. Mm-hmm. Because I did, but like this year, but because like any, 10-year-old can go get a drone and get the same shots that work. Like there's no,
it's not special anymore.
It's really not.
Yeah.
Like anybody can do it. I did a fall drone video this year, and I almost flew into some dude's drone at Lake Willoughby.
Oh my God.
And I was like, oh my gosh. Like it's cool because it's like, I don't know if getting more competitive is the right word. Mm-hmm. Because you're competing with people who aren't in the business.
Right.
But it's like keeping up with what works is very interesting right now.
Yeah.
It's developing very quickly.
Super fast. And it's really tough as a business, right? When you're trying to market this stuff, to explain to clientele that don't know the intricacies of what it is. And I'm still learning them myself, right? And I think that's tough too, because somebody's like, well, what's the difference between a $500 video and a $5,000 video? It's like, well, a lot. Like,
yeah, exactly.
There's a lot that goes into it. And I think the further along technology goes, like, I don't know if you guys have seen the specs on the new iPhone 13, but it's insane.
That's unbelievable.
It's insane that you could just, and everybody's just going to have one. And if you take the time to spend an hour on YouTube, that's the other thing, is like, you don't need to go to school for this stuff anymore, because you can find literally anything and everything you want for free on the internet. And I've subscribed to Skillshare, and I just have a slot in my schedule each week that I just put towards like continuing education and learning new stuff and learning about new equipment, new techniques, etc. But yeah, it's crazy. And like you said, it just changes so rapidly that you're like, how do I keep up? Because then, you know, you don't want to change your price points with customers every 3 months, but it's like, that's the rate at which things change. And then annually, like, I just bought the new GoPro Hero 10. It's insane.
I think it's sick, dude.
It's insane. I was like, just the internal stabilizer. You don't even need a gimbal. You don't need really a stabilizer at all.
That's unbelievable.
Like, you just do it with your hand. Like, the only thing that, you know, they could do better is, from the exposure triangle standpoint, having aperture, because you don't really get that depth of field. And since the lenses are so small, you don't have that like focal like length blur behind. But otherwise, it's an absolutely insane camera.
Yeah. And their compression is starting to get better and all that stuff. They are wicked impressive. So you mentioned a few things that I want to ask about, but they all start like going back in time a little bit.
Yeah.
When did you first get interested in this stuff?
So I would say that I've been interested in videography. Photos is like very new for me. I would say videography I have been interested in since I was probably in 7th or 8th grade. Honestly, you might remember this, when we were in high school, we had to make like a history project our sophomore year. And that was like the first time where I like really needed to, and I think I was using like Windows Media Player or something to edit this stuff.
I did a green screen video for that project.
Yeah,
it was
dude.
so cheesy.
Yeah. But I think that was the first time where I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like, I like doing this stuff. And then I've been snowboarding since I was little. And in that world, like, somebody's always got a camera. You're always trying to make edits and like make cool stuff and do tricks and film it and whatever. And then I got a GoPro probably when I was like 16 or 17. And I was just like, I'm just going to like film everything. I just want to like film stuff. And then you kind of realize as you go through, like, editing is really what makes videos like super special. Obviously, you need to know what you're doing from a film standpoint at the basics and the shots that you want to get and stuff. But the things that make videos dynamic that I'm learning a lot more now is like sound design, right? And like, how are your transitions coming together when you're shooting, and what are you looking for, and things of that nature. And then I've always, because I've been on the business side of things and the medicine side of things, I've actually been on the other end of the camera a lot of the time, getting film, talking. So I've been around it. I know I kind of have been involved with the process of a photo shoot, with the process of video production, of knowing like what those files are going to look like, where they're going to get posted, how they're going to get reformatted, what they're for, right? Thinking about, you know, that pre-production process. And then, so going back like 5 years now, in 2017, Dylan Bonk was the one that came on with me to start Concept, and he was our media person, and he did photo and video. And I was like, all this stuff looks amazing. And there aren't any companies around here that are taking advantage like at this level. Right. And particularly in the gym industry. And I was like, what can be our separating factor? And it's like, well, how you tell your story, right? Because like whatever you put out there is like what the public perception is going to be. So for me, it was just really, really important to have that stuff done. So fast forward, Dylan and I's partnership just didn't work out. So he moved on from the company, And then my good friend Peter Cirilli came on and started filming with us. And then we had an employee, Chelsea Pillsbury, who was the significant other of Scott Barber. I don't know if you know Scott Barber film. Yep. So he helped us out with a bunch of stuff. And I was like, this is like so sick. Like, I just love being able to like show our business in this capacity. And then Peter gave me his old Canon Mark III. And I was like, I'm just going to start messing around with this stuff. Because it's expensive, right? Like you pay somebody $500 to show up for an hour to take photos for you, and then you're posting. And we had a team of people who were helping us out. So we had like different influencers that would kind of be involved with the gym, who would help us with our social media posting, reposting things, taking quick clips when they're just in the gym, whatever. And then we would invest in like these monthly like production. We just barter everything. We'd just be like, yeah, come train for free and do this for us, which was super helpful. And then when COVID hit, I was like, okay, I have to be the one to do this. First of all, like people aren't like allowed here. I've got to transition our company like completely over to digital. Like we had a relatively solid online presence from like a programming standpoint. But I was like, I have to save all of the money that I can to continue paying our staff. And so I was like, I'm just going to do this stuff. I'm going to go in and I'm going to do the website development. I'm going to have to figure out the graphic design component. I'm going to have to do the photos and the videos to show like how we're transitioning, right? Like how we're going to go from like being this in-person thing and be able to retell those stories without paying these people a top dollar to produce these things for us and post and write the caption copy and all that stuff. And so I had been using like Photoshop and Lightroom and Premiere Pro and stuff for like smaller scale projects and whatnot, at a very basic level. And then it forced me from March of 2020 to August 2020 to like really learn how to do it legitimately. And like I remember the biggest thing was like not even knowing, oh cool, like my shutter speed needs to be double my frame rate, for example, like those little things. And then understanding like, okay, cool. Well, how does somebody take like if you're shooting at 120, how do they speed that up and make it look like 24? And like all of those different like kind of like key factors and stuff. And then looking into, all right, what is the format of a 1080 by 1080 post on Instagram versus a post that's 1350 by 1080 versus a 1920 by 1080 reel, and like all of those intricacies as well. And then I figured it out by August, and I felt like I was making relatively good stuff, like for the equipment that I had and whatnot, to kind of go off and do this separately. Because I just knew going into the winter, I was like, we're just going to get hammered financially here. And I knew that I could charge top dollar to go produce stuff from a commercial standpoint. And at Concept, we work with a lot of business owners. Because you're charging people anywhere from $400 to $1,000 a month to come train at our facility one-on-one with a coach. And so a lot of the people that were coming to see us, the majority I would say are relatively affluent, like middle class, upper middle class to the upper echelons. And so because I had relationships with those people and they saw the stuff that I was doing for the gym, I was like, yeah, no, I've been making this stuff. And they're like, could you do that for me? And I was like, sure. And then now it's just been figuring out like I don't even know how to charge for stuff half the time, because I'm like, I have no idea how much I should charge, because I can do things really efficiently now. You know what I mean? You kind of get in the flow of things. You start to make templates. You have systems and processes and things like that. So Amy's like, you can't just like charge $200 for like a 5-minute video that you're like shooting with like $10,000 worth of gear. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, come on, I can polish that off in an afternoon.
Yeah, exactly. And I like it too. It's really hard to charge for stuff that you like genuinely enjoy doing. I've kind of found. And so I guess, yeah, that's the answer to your question. It's just been like process. And then because I have all of these friends in the industry, like Peter's probably been like the biggest influence on me as far as helping me with like, this is what you should get, and this would be like good equipment for you. And it's been really cool. I've really appreciated his help with all the stuff. And then he's my next door neighbor now. He bought the house right next to me. So
No
it's pretty
way.
sweet. Just like see each other every day.
I have been wanting to meet Peter forever.
He's the man. You guys should have him on this podcast.
I've been trying to reach out to him, so give him a poke.
Sure. Yeah. I'll mention it.
So I know Jack Whitney really well.
Cool. Yeah. Yep. So Jack's another person. He helped us with a few videos at Concept too.
Oh, right on. Yeah, Jack's rad. He and I, he was a year or two older than me, I think.
Cool.
But like through high school and everything, and then after high school is kind of all that stuff. But like he's really tight with Peter, and apparently you.
Yeah.
But you come to learn at some point, I guess. But that's awesome. Now, like the other thing that I found really interesting is, okay, so yeah, obviously through 2020 you had a lot of time to like go and learn this stuff or whatever. I mean, I'm sure you were still doing a lot with Concept, trying to like, you're like, I don't know about you, but 2020 was the most busy year I've ever had in my life. Mm-hmm. But you said you still today set a time during your week to go learn stuff.
Oh yeah. Have to.
Which I think is awesome and something that I should probably start doing now. But tell me a little bit about that, just because, like, what has that done for you? The fact that you're continually every single week setting that time aside.
So I think the biggest thing that it's done for me is it allows me to never get comfortable. And so every time I go out on a shoot, right, I'm always trying to do something a little bit differently or try some new technique I learned, and vice versa when I come back and I'm editing. And this is everything from processes, right? As far as like, how do I export my stuff, and like what adapter should I be using that's the best, and what's going to make that process faster? Because I'm just super obsessed with time, right? So like I do a lot of stuff, right? Like I'm still the owner. I don't even know I wouldn't call myself the CEO of Concept Move anymore. I'm more like the owner and founder. I'm the bank, really. That's what it is.
Sure.
And then I have outsourced creative, and they're both, Concept was a huge, over $1 million in revenue company. And I'm trying to get outsourced to that level. But I'm also 28 years old, and Amy and I were supposed to get married this upcoming weekend, which we postponed due to COVID and some family stuff. And then it's just like a lot, right? And then we own a house, which is like a job in of itself, like a 1969 Essex Junction home that's just like falling apart that I constantly am putting back together. So all of those things, right? And then to the point of like value and pricing things out and whatever, I have found that the in-between stuff, right? It's like, how are you transporting your gear? How long does it take to get set up once you're there? How much does it take to take stuff apart when you're leaving? What's your travel commitment look like? And then what does it look like when you come home and you take all that stuff out of your bags and you put it away and put everything on shelves? And then how long, like I shot a wedding the other day and I did it for free because I just wanted experience. It took me 3 hours to just transfer the files. And I can't use my computer.
Don't ever shoot a wedding for free again. By the way.
No, I won't. I will never do that again. But it was a really great experience for me. It gave me 10 hours with the gimbal and the Sony and trying a million different tricks and things. And I had the drone with me and I was taking photos too while I was there. And but what I found, right, like when you make your pricing, I'm just like, oh, well, I'm going to be there shooting for 8 hours. And then like, I'm just going to come home and it's going to take me 6 hours to edit the video, and so I'll charge for 14 hours. Meanwhile, there's like an hour back and forth travel, there's an hour of setup time, there's all this file transfer stuff, and then you got to figure out where you're going to store it and house all these things, and then like what's your process of like actually getting those things into Premiere, and how are you going to structure that stuff. And so that is one of the things. So I use a calendar like religiously, like it's every second of my day, to the point where I'm like, this is what time I'm eating, this is what time I'm going to get dressed, this is what time I'm going to do whatever. Right. And so I have found over the years, for somebody that's as busy as I am, if I don't do it like that, right, my calendar and my to-do list are like kind of in sync all the time. I forget stuff, I lose track of time, so I'll end up spending too much time on a certain project, which takes away from other things. And so I guess, yeah, to answer your question, it's just like, I'm just obsessed with that organization of things. And so I put everything, because when I was working at Concept and I was training and I had meetings and I was meeting with employees and structuring stuff, everything had to be blocked. And then you get into like the creative world where your schedule's just empty and you're like, I can just wake up at 10 in the morning and just edit for 2 hours and whatever. And then I found myself a lot too, you know, I'd be like, oh, cool, I'm going to try to do this. And what does this do to a photo? And you end up spending like 30 minutes on like a singular photo, which a client is not paying for. It's like, oh my God, okay. So I ended up, instead of doing it like that, where I'm like getting behind on all these like different things, I was like, I need to treat my schedule like my like old schedule at Concept, where I have like training hours and I have block time to meet with employees and meetings and whatever. And one of those things, each week at the gym, we would have a continuing education meeting every Tuesday right after our staff meeting. So we would have a staff meeting from 1 to 2, continuing ed to keep our skills up to date from 2 to 3. And we'd just do it together, or we'd watch videos, or one of us would come up with a presentation, or we'd go to conferences, or we'd listen to a podcast or whatever. And so I said, I'm going to take 2 hours a week and I'm just going to learn something new about media and camera gear, whatever. And I don't have like a necessarily like a structure to it. It's just, I need to learn something different each week. And then the other thing is I'm in my truck a lot more, driving to different places, driving to shoots, driving to meetings. It's not like I have this centralized office like we had at Concept where I'm just there all day, get there at 7, leave at 6, like not doing that anymore. So listening to podcasts, I love YouTube. I love listening to YouTube. I love Peter McKinnon. I love all those like vlog type, like this is how I did this and this is how I made this effect and this is what I did and this is how to make this preset and this is how to color correct this video and all of those different things. And then because I'm shooting all the time, I can just like take that on my way to a shoot and just be like, I'm going to try this and see what it looks like. And just trying and failing and trying and failing. Acting more confident than I am.
That's more important than you could even imagine.
So like just showing up and you know, I had this experience the other day, like we got this client who was like, I really love your video stuff. Like, can you do animation? And I was like, yeah.
The answer is yes.
Yeah. And so I was like, I'm going to, and kind of similar to like the wedding story, right? But I was just like, no, I've never done that before, but I'm not going to say that I haven't, and I'm just going to figure it out. And so I go on Skillshare and I go on YouTube and I spend 6 hours in After Effects and I make this awesome video of like this map of Vermont and like these lines coming over and things popping up and sweet. Whatever. And then it like comes back to the logo and they were so psyched. They were like awesome. So happy with it. And I charged them $500 for it, and the next person, their closest quote was like $3,000 for this like 20-second like animation video.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah,
and you learned something.
Yeah, and now I can do, and now I've used it again. Like, yeah. And so I've always been, I always try to be paid to learn, if that makes sense. And so I'll come in, I'll accept a job, and I'll be like, all right. And so I go and do my research and my due diligence, and I figure out. I'm always like playing with stuff. And then the other thing I would say, as far as like your question about how I kind of got into this stuff, I love video games.
Oh, okay.
And I have been playing video games since I was like, can remember. And I didn't realize like, cause Amy plays with me now.
Nice.
And
That's
we
epic.
have, yeah, it's so fun. So we have 2 PS5s. I have 2 Oculus Quests. I just like do everything with her. Yeah. And, so I think you just learn a lot from like a creative standpoint playing games and understanding joysticks. And like, so when I'm like out controlling the drone, it's like playing a freaking video game and you're like flying through stuff and whatever. So I would say that has helped me tremendously. And then there's also all those cut scenes. Like I'm a very visual person. If I watch something once, I can usually recreate it. And so that's kind of where I get my inspiration from certain things. It's like, how was that done? And there's a lot of people that I look to for influence, Peter being one of them. I love your videos with AJ. Like, you know, when you go in and you make those like initial vlog cut scenes and like the intros and outros and things like that. It's like so fun. And then I will say the other thing that's helped me from a time standpoint, kind of expedite things, not charge clients up the wazoo, but using like motion templates I subscribe to the service called Motion Array, and like Envato is like similar, but so sick, dude.
Huge.
Like,
Huge.
Because then you're just like, oh, cool. Like this is already like all this work is done for me. I don't have to go in and like modify all these keyframes and make a bunch of like images in Photoshop and bring them in and rotate them and do all these things. It's like you just go in and change out your colors. And I think that's the type of stuff that people just with a regular iPhone and Instagram Reels are not going to be able to make. Right. And so I think having those effects are kind of where things are going to be going in the future.
You know, that's such a great perspective. Like your perspective on learning like constantly and consistently. And like, if I can get paid to learn, like I often will look at, if somebody asked me to do some crazy motion graphics job, I'm like, you know, but then I go and find a guy to outsource it to.
Right.
Rather than taking the time and saying, even though I'm not getting the amount of money that I should from this, I'm getting the investment in my own skills and my own knowledge and all that stuff like that. That's honestly something that I need to do better, but that's huge. That's really cool. That's a great outlook on it.
I think I've approached everything that way. And I'll say, I've talked to Peter about this a little bit too. And it's like, a lot of people come into this industry from a creative standpoint. Right. And they're like really passionate about what they do and being artistic and doing the design work and all of that stuff. I'm coming into this industry as a business owner and an entrepreneur, and I know how to run a business, and I know how to run a business successfully without a pandemic. But I'm really proud of myself for being able to make this transition and have gone through this like with a pandemic and to see like where I am now. And it's because of that fact, right? It's like, it's constantly looking for opportunity, taking advantage of those things, moving forward with it, and then not being afraid. Like, cause the worst thing that happens is you're like, totally fucked this up and I'm not going to charge you. Right. Like, sure. And, I also have a relationship with a lot of the clients too, which like gives me a little bit of that wiggle room. But at the end of the day, like, I'm a risk taker. I'm an adrenaline junkie. Like, and so if I screw something up and I have to pay somebody else $1,000 to fix what I did to deliver for this client, like I will. And hopefully I've learned something from that process.
That's a good point too. I mean, you're shooting landscaping footage. If you mess up, you can go back next week and shoot it again. It's not a wedding that's a little more higher stakes.
Correct. Yeah. Where you have like one opportunity.
Yeah. Wow, that's just such a good perspective.
So that has been really, really helpful. And then what I'll say to that point is, because I'm approaching things as a business owner, now that I know what to do, right, at a basic level, right? And I did this with the gym too. Like, I'm not a massage therapist, but we hired massage therapists and they worked there and they did a great job. And we hired nutritionists and we hired group fitness instructors. And I always knew what they did. I would always try to put myself into a position. Like, I went to school for athletic medicine. I know how to do manual therapy. I understand the physiology behind it, right? So I understand massage. We had a nutrition department. I understand nutrition at its fundamental levels. I understand group fitness at its fundamental levels because I've coached groups. I understand how to train people one-on-one. From a strength and conditioning standpoint, I know how to do PT with people because I've done those clinical rotations, right? And you can, and then now I know how to price those things. I know what the deliverable experience should be for consumers. And I know what the employee should be charging, how they should be acting, all of those things, right? I would say the same thing on the creative side of things. Like, I'm never, because I try to do everything, right? I'm never going to be the best person at animation. I'm never going to be the best videographer. I'm never going to be the best photographer. I'm never going to be the best graphic designer. But I understand the process of what goes into those things now. And so I can outsource it and know what's a reasonable rate, right? If I'm like sourcing people, I know what a reasonable expectation is for the client as far as like a deliverable. I know I can actually go to bat for people, right? Like, let's say we hire an employee one day that's a videographer and they're like, dude, this project took me like 45 hours. I can go and have a conversation with a client for them and be like, no, this is why it took 45 hours. Mm-hmm. Instead of having no idea what they do or why it takes them that long and being like, what the fuck do you mean it took 45 hours?
Yeah,
you
right.
know what I mean? You're like, oh my God.
Yeah, that's like 20 hours over budget.
Yeah, exactly. And I do the same thing with my house and DIY projects. Like I will never do sheetrocking and mudding and taping ever again. But I did it once and it sucked, and I'm willing to pay like $1 million for somebody to do it in the future. Yeah. Right. And so I can kind of learn that stuff with the media side of things. And I've really gravitated towards video, I would say. So now it's like, you know, I don't want to spend 6 hours making a logo. It's not my favorite thing, but I'll spend 26 hours editing a 60-second long video because I just think it's so fun and interesting. So that's been a really big benefit to me too. And then being able to grow and you can kind of see where things are going to develop and how you want to structure certain things. And then there's just a lot of amazing like freelance vendors out there, right? And so if you can bring those people work, it becomes like a mutually beneficial relationship. And I always try to make things a win-win for everybody.
So I think, you know, one of the big reasons that we wanted to do this podcast in general, the What's Your Real Deal, is because we live in Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're talking about, you know, Peter Cirilli and all these guys and all these local dudes. And I this question kind of came to my head because you mentioned like, oh, a lot of people come because they're creatives, right? That's especially true in Vermont. And like, it tends to kind of hurt us guys because like, they're like, oh yeah, we'll charge, you know, $10 an hour to come shoot you a big budget video. And then us guys are like, oh, like, you know what I mean? But anyway, like, can you speak towards doing this business in Vermont? You know, you said you grew up in Connecticut, which I guess isn't that different. But like,
it was different. I grew up in the city in Connecticut, in New Haven. And I didn't really have an opportunity to like do any of this. So I would say that Vermont gave me an opportunity to be more artistic and to go snowboarding and to meet more people that were, oh, check out I have this camcorder. Let's go film this rail shoot or whatever. So sorry, I like kind of cut you off there, but
no, you're good.
Where are we going with this question?
No, I just want to talk about like the Vermont film scene. Yeah. Basically. Now, like for me, and we don't have to go this direction necessarily, but my big thing is like you can go to New York City and do a 2-hour shoot and charge $30,000.
Yeah.
While in Vermont, it doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't.
You know what I mean? So I don't know. I just want to talk about like what the business looks like in Vermont a little bit. Like, for instance, I love Vermont. I plan to live in Vermont. I have one client in Vermont.
Yep.
Out of all of my clients, one of them is in Vermont, and I travel elsewhere for all the other ones.
Yep.
Like, but you have a lot of Vermont clients, it sounds like.
All Vermont clients. I have my first Connecticut client potentially coming up on Thursday. I have to pitch him.
Nice.
But he owns an orthopedic practice, which I'm excited to do because I think it's anytime you travel and whatever, that's just a whole different dynamic.
Oh,
right. Yeah. As far as the scene in Vermont, I would say, and it's surprised me, both from the gym front and from the media side of things, is how much opportunity there actually is that we don't really know about because we just kind of like assume Vermont's like this tiny little place. And then what you can charge, like fairly. No, you can't charge $30,000 for a 2-hour shoot, but you can charge $2,500 for a day, right? And produce a solid video for an organization. And then I think there's a difference, right, between like, no, you're not going to go work with like a local 18-year-old snowboarder and have his parents like pay you to film him every day in Vermont. You might get that in New York City, right? Like, but just going after companies. And so I think for me that it's been, I've been surprised how easy it's been. I haven't had a single person tell me no. That said, though, the way that I've structured the company is to protect me from exactly that. Because I think if I only did video and photo, right? And like, that's what a lot of creators do. It's what a lot of freelancers do, right? is say, I'm going to go and I'm going to take, and I experienced this when I was at the gym as well, because I had people like Peter and Elliot and Holden and like some of these other people that were, it was a lot of different kind of moving parts, right? Like Holden would do our posting sometimes, or it would come from an influencer. Peter would make the photo content. Elliot would do the graphic design work. And there were a lot of different like moving pieces. And it was really wonderful to have these photos on a consistent standpoint that I could use for a bunch of different stuff. And he was like so helpful with all of that stuff. But I think as a business owner, I wanted somebody that was going to come in and take the photos and do something with them that was going to benefit me. And I would say that that's probably the biggest thing that's missing from freelance creators from an ease of access standpoint to companies. Because I can go into these companies that I can pitch them and be like, no, I'm going to come in and I'm going to take photos, I'm going to do video work, and I'm going to make your company look really good. And then I'm going to take that stuff and I'm going to put it out in the world on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube. And then I'm going to manage your website, because we do web design and all that stuff. And so I'm going to take these monthly photos and I'm going to change out your stuff seasonally on your website. And we're going to update your promotions and we're going to do those things. And then I'm going to go into the back end of Google Ads and I'm going to run a search ad with the images that we used, or this video, or I'm going to do YouTube pre-roll or whatever. And they're like, oh, you can do all of that and I just don't have to worry about it. It's like, yeah, that's what we do. And so that's the biggest thing, I think, is if you're a freelance person, if you want to take it to the next level and have more consistent business locally, you have to kind of turn yourself into an agency, in my opinion, because people don't know what to do with it. And then the biggest thing is business owners, and I'm speaking from personal experience, don't want to have to deal with it. I want to focus on my business and my operations, and I have a lot of stuff I got to deal with my employees and emails and everything else. I don't have the bandwidth to think about how I'm going to post this video on YouTube this afternoon when I'm doing everything else. But I want it to happen, and I want the leads to come through the door, and I want you to tell me what my follow-up process should be.
Understand the benefits of a video.
Exactly, and how it's going to work. Instead of just being like, cool, I have a $2,500 video that I posted on YouTube that's not getting any traction because nobody knows what my brand is, right? And so I would say for me, that's been the biggest thing. It's like coming from a place of empathy and understanding, especially in the middle of this like pandemic where business owners are just absolutely fried, and being like, I'm going to help you. I'm going to take this stuff off your plate. We're going to do it. We're going to do it for a reasonable price. Like, we're charging $1,000 a month to do like 2 to 3 hours of content production, editing, posting on social, doing copywriting, ads, web management, all that stuff, which isn't enough, which is like a whole different conversation, which we'll get there. But I had to get my foot in the door somehow. And back to like the learning process, right? It's like, I'm going to get paid to learn. And I'm in a much different spot now from like a quality standpoint than I was a year ago or even 6 months ago. And so that's another thing. So we do these startups, right? So like we come in and we evaluate things. We identify business like brand development. We look at your operational systems, because that's the other thing. I'm not going to work with a client if you can't even pick up the phone to like call a lead that we got you, because it's just not even going to make any sense. Or I'm not going to make a video if you don't have like a location for somebody to go to yet or whatever. So I'm always trying to look into their best interest. And I'll tell clients, like if we have pitches with them, like, you're not in a position where having a solid social media like outlook will be good because you can't retain a single employee you have, right? Like, so maybe like, let's look at some business development stuff, which I also really like, kind of like that business coaching side of things. But I think from a creative standpoint, if you can approach certain situations more like an entrepreneur and like a business owner, and put yourself in the position of whoever it is you're delivering this content for, right? Like, why are they hiring you? And how are you going to benefit them? And how are you going to show? Because that's really what it comes down to as far as like charging. Like, I could charge $30,000 for a video if I can show that I'm going to get you $1 million return, right?
Exactly.
So I think that's kind of the biggest difference, and why it's been so helpful, because I can speak that big business language. I understand what it's like to have a big team of employees. I understand the struggle of being a business owner, an entrepreneur, and those people, and trying to grow a business. And I think I've had the platform where I can say, this is what I did with this business because of this stuff. It was completely correlated to the content production. We were getting like sometimes we'd get like 20 Instagram leads in a week. And this was back in like 2018 before everything kind of changed and we were just posting photo. But that's huge, right? And it's just because we're getting in front of people and we have those touch points and we were able to capitalize on it. And I had a business coach who helped me with the follow-up process and how to manage people and what the sales scripts should look like. And I've just taken that knowledge and experience and just embedded it into a creative agency.
That's what I was wondering was you're quite a smart businessman. Where did you learn those chops?
So Nate Malley, shout out to Nate Malley, has been like, gosh, probably one of the most influential people that will ever have been in my life. He still is in my life. But so when I was working at Body Resolution, which was the gym that I started working for right out of college, because when I graduated school, I had gotten to the UVM med program. I was planning on just taking a year to like save some money, do some personal training, and then I was going to go back to med school because I wanted to be a surgeon because I've had like 28 surgeries. And right before I was like about to quit because I hated this job and I didn't like my boss. I have a lot more respect for him now that I've had to go through it myself. But at the time, kind of being young and naive, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I want to do my own thing. I've always been kind of like entrepreneurial minded, like just want to do my thing my way. And I know I'm going to do a good job type deal. 6 weeks before I quit, Nate starts training with me. The owner of the company is like, you have to train this guy. And I'm like, wow. He's like, he's a just super valuable client. We want to get more business from him. He owns a real estate company, etc. And so I'm like, okay. So I start training Nate 4 times a week, I think, at like 6 o'clock in the morning. And the cool thing about the gym industry and being a trainer is, like I said, all the connections you make and all the people that you meet because people are paying a premium to come and work with you. And because they pay such high amounts of money, they're usually either high up in white collar positions at their companies or they own businesses. I would say the people that I ended up working with, and maybe that's just how it kind of like worked out for me. But I would just ask him questions the whole session. I'd just be like, how do you do this? And how do you do that? And I remember one day, I'll never forget this. We were talking about like saving money and retirements versus investing, because you don't get taught anything about money ever in school. And so I'm just asking him all these things. And I just remember it really stood out to me that he was like, oh yeah, no, I put like $6,000 a month in my retirement account. And I was like, I don't even know what that means. Like, what does that look like? That's so much money. And, so that's when I was like, I got to start paying more attention to like really what he's saying. Cause he was young too. Like, I think he was, when we first started working together, he was like 33 or 34, had just had a kid. Like, he was more closely where I am kind of approaching in my life now, which is cool. And I just remember listening to him. He would, tell me these stories about business, and I was like, maybe I want to own a business. Like, that sounds fucking awesome. And I knew I was a good trainer, and I knew that I had really good relationships with my clients, and I knew that I could run a business and a gym better than this one was being run. And so 6 weeks later, and at this time I was making like $19 an hour, like training like myself into the dirt, working like 60 hours a week probably. And I remember I had just bought a house and I had just bought a new truck. And then after those two things went through, I quit my job. And my parents were like, what the hell are you doing? And I was like, I got this house and I'm just going to train people out of my basement. And so I started telling my clients that I was going to leave. And I was not really thinking anything of telling Nate. I was like, he's just going to find another trainer and he'll be fine, whatever. And when I told him, he was like, I'll pay you $1,000 a month to come train me at my house. I don't want to work with anybody. And we had only been working together for like 4 weeks at this time.
What?
And I was like, all right, dude.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
And then my aunt and uncle, who I'm very close with, did the same deal. They were like, come every day and like we'll just like go back and forth and you'll train like my uncle and her. And I was like, that's like almost as much money as I'm making after taxes, working like 10 hours.
Wow.
So I was like, all right, I'm gonna go do this for sure. And then I got other clients and people had left and came to start working with me and whatever. And then about a year had gone by. I had been doing that. I had saved enough money, and Nate was like, you got to take this to the next level. And I was like, I know how to train. I know how to like ask people for money. I know how to like transfer shit into my business account, but I don't know how to like run a business or hire employees or what the paperwork process is like, or like any of that stuff to like try to grow something. And so I kind of thought about it a little bit more. And one of the biggest things with Nate, because he owns a real estate team through Keller Williams in the Market Center. He has the biggest real estate team in New England that's been just kind of like up and down. They're always like seemingly like top 10. But he's always been really into coaching. He's always talked about coaching. He's always coached his staff and employees and kind of like that same like learning mentality. And I said, will you coach me once a week for an hour? Like on business, and I'll train you for free, like forever. And he was like, sure, let's do it. And that's how I've learned everything about business. We would meet every single week. We'd make plans together. He'd hold me accountable. We'd set goals. He was like the toughest person on me. He'd be light and funny sometimes. I feel like half the time, anytime I'd come to him with a real like problem, I'd be like, this is really stressing me out. He's like, stop being a bitch about it. It's like, oh my God. And we maintained that relationship for a really long time. And now his company is an organization that we work with for outsource creative, and we do all of his content production and whatever. And he is one of my groomsmen in my wedding.
No way.
So that's how I've learned everything. I run things by him all the time. And then Amy and I started working with a different business coach this spring named Roger Price, who was sensational, much more on the management side. Nate was more like sales and operations, like just you got to get X, Y, and Z done. Roger was more like HR kind of related. So I learned a ton of stuff from him. And he's another company that we started working with him from outsource, because like I need a new website. Like, let's just do it. And so I learned a lot of stuff from him, and now I have a conversation with Nate hopefully this week or next to get back into like regular coaching with him, because I want the accountability from a business standpoint to grow outsource. I need to take it to the next level. Like, I'm completely strapped. Amy's completely strapped. We need to price ourselves in such a way where we can hire like freelance filmmakers and photographers and stuff, such that we're doing like the administrative component for them, and then we're paying them pretty much whatever they want to charge, and then implementing whatever the content is.
Right.
And I've always just been the type of person that likes to work in teams with people. I like to help people succeed. That was always the biggest thing with Concept, was like I'd meet with every one of my employees and be like, what are your goals and how do you want to execute on this thing? Holding people accountable to that stuff. And that's just why we grew, because between the to-do list, the calendar, and then accountability, it's like stuff just happens and things move forward. And so now, because I'm so new in this industry still, I'm trying to figure out like, how do agencies structure stuff, and how do they outsource people? And that was kind of the idea behind the name too. It was like, outsource your creative work to a company that will take it off your plate so that you can kind of de-stress as a business owner.
And then you want to do the same thing, outsource your workload.
Sort of. I mean, I want to have like, I don't want to have employees again. I don't think, not at the level that I did. It's really, really stressful. And the biggest thing that the pandemic made me realize was like, you basically as a business owner and as an employer are kind of in control of like people's fate, if you will. And I really didn't like that. Like, we were not in a position to do what some of these bigger companies did, where it's like everybody can just work from home and we'll just pay you and don't worry about it. Because we're not like a product company. People have to come into this facility. We're compensated on an hourly basis essentially for the services that we provide. but people had healthcare and retirement accounts and salaries and all these things. And to have to make like the decisions to cut that stuff off, because it was either like, cool, I can either pay you for like 3 more weeks, or I'm going to have to let like half this team go to be able to keep the business open and pay people for 2 more years, for example. And I was just like, I don't want to have to be in like a position to make those decisions ever. And I think I will get back to the point. It's just still very fresh, like all of those decisions that had to be made. And naturally, when you're making those decisions, you lose relationships with people. And I think it's really challenging for people that are employees to see the perspective of the people up top, because they think they're just pulling all this money and don't have to worry about anything, which isn't true. So I want to structure outsource such that like we have vendors that we go to, and it's a collaborative effort. And then I will hire internal people most likely for like the account management and doing like paid advertising and things. But like probably like a small, like maybe 5 to 10 person team. That's the cool thing about this type of stuff, is super scalable. Whereas with the gym, it's like you can only handle a certain amount of like clients, and then you got to hire a new employee. And if you have like one bad month where like somebody's schedule just like falls off a cliff, like you have to just eat that as a business. You don't really have to do that in like the media world. At least I haven't seen it yet.
That's so interesting, because this is literally what I've been trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And when you pulled it all together, your name is literally outsourced. So like, yeah, okay, that should have been obvious. But like, because I'm at this crossroads right now where I got a bunch of different clients for 6'5", and then AJ's taking a whole lot more of my time.
Yep.
And he plans to take even more of it.
Yep.
And I'm at this place where I don't want to just say no to all of my clients, right?
Right.
But I'm like, I either need to jump up in prices to hire a guy, or get really good at outsourcing stuff. And that's something I'm trying to figure out as well.
Yeah.
Which is super interesting that you're going through the same thing. I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, no, it is cool. It's a good problem to have.
It's a great problem to have. I'm so thankful to have that issue.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's a problem.
And you know, Peter does the same thing. And what he does, he just prices himself out of jobs. I don't think Peter wants to. He's pretty low key, I would say. He gets along with everybody. My experience, like as far as like my observations of him and conversations that I've had with him, is like, and it sounds like you run into a similar issue where it's like people are hiring you for you. And so like
exactly
outsourcing, you can't outsource yourself, right? Unless you start to advertise yourself as an agency or a partnership, and like, nope, we do this. And then it's like, or you could have somebody film for you and you do the editing, or vice versa. You film and you outsource the editing to whoever or however you do it. And I know for him, he just is like, no, I'm just going to continue to raise my prices and just price myself out of work. And if somebody says yes, you get paid like double or triple. And it's funny because he's said that, he's made that comment a couple times. And then I went to my sister's house, who lives in Old Lyme, Connecticut. She's 12 years older than me, so she never moved up to Vermont with us. She's always stayed planted down there. But we went down there a couple weeks ago and met the guy that's the CEO of that hospital group, who we have the potential of working with on Thursday maybe. And he straight up said, because he was like, oh, I'm really interested in that for my business. I was like, almost not really giving him the time of day, where it's like, we're too busy, you're out of state, I have no idea like how that would work. And he's like, well, I would pay like double or even triple for like a rush fee to just get this stuff done. And then you're like, oh, cool. So like, so it's, I think it's kind of not having that like scarcity mindset where like you're so afraid of people saying no. And we all struggle with this, dude. Like I struggle with it wicked. I'm like, I'm really going to charge $2,500 for a video, like to do this thing that comes so naturally to me now. And to do this, and clients say yes and don't really bat an eye. And if they do, they're probably not like a good client. Like you don't want to deal with somebody that's like trying to nickel and dime you, or is like explained to me like line item by line item. It's like, do you want me to tell you like how long it takes me to transfer files? And it's like 150 gigabytes of information that I need to have stored, and I've got to like worry about having 2 card slots in my camera because God forbid one of them fails, and all these different things that they just don't know or think about.
Yeah.
But just like you wouldn't like, you don't question an attorney's price point. You just know that you need one.
Yeah. Well, I think like where you and I differ especially is like you've had employees before.
Yeah.
For me, that's like a big jump.
It is.
Like I've never had that. I've never done that. Like, so my dad is very entrepreneurial guy, owns 3 businesses.
Yep.
We're in my dad's house currently, by the way.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't bother him.
Yeah.
For me, I'm like, man, having to like take care of people, like as you said, I'm like, that thought just terrifies me.
Yeah.
Like, what if you run out of work?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Like,
and you do. Like,
what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Like, you know?
So I would say for me, the biggest thing that I've learned from like an employee standpoint is you have to over communicate. And like, I'll have, this kind of goes both ways, right? There's a point where you can be too transparent, and there's a point where you can be not transparent enough. And I think COVID was just like, that was 10 times heightened, right? Because everybody's just scared constantly. And you don't want to be like, yeah, we have no money left, and then have everybody quit. And you also don't want to be like, we've got tons of work and you're going to be employed forever and don't worry about anything. And so like, I think at the end of the day, it's just being honest with people. But the biggest thing is, from an employee standpoint, is having really clear-cut expectations. You have to know like exactly what you're going to expect them to do. And you have to completely communicate that with them, and then continue to communicate that with them over and over and over again. And I would say that the other thing that I learned through concept is like, if you're going to have employees, you cannot be friends with them. You can't hang out with them outside of work. You can't, and I hate that, right? Like I hate that I'm even saying it to you right now, because most of my staff were my age. Some of them were older than me, and like, it's really, and you're young too, right? Like, it's hard to have that kind of expectation with people, especially when you're all working as a team towards a common goal, and you're psyched on stuff, and like, you want to work together, and you're like, I want to hang out with you, and like, you seem like a really good person. But the reason I say that is because it's way harder to hold your friends accountable and to have critical conversations when the time comes to have those conversations. And there are times where you might never have to have that, right? Like, I have had previous employees that I'm still friends with, and we had great relationships, and people are coming to our wedding that have either have moved on or whatever. So I think it's just being polite and cordial and understanding those relationships. But that was the biggest thing. It's like, you can't get comfortable with whoever your staff is, because you never know when you're going to have that conversation. Like, you might be best buddies with somebody, and then you completely run out of work, and you're like, dude, I don't have any more work, and I got to take care of myself and the business to keep it going. And maybe I can work with you again in the future. And that's just a really, really hard conversation to have with somebody that you have like a more intimate relationship with from like a friendship standpoint.
Yeah.
Which is also why, like, and then to your point, when you hire an employee, you are responsible for taking care of them, especially in the state that we live in. Like, you get no favors as a business owner here. Like, and the employees have all of this stuff, and you gotta make sure you make the right decisions too. Like, we're still paying unemployment claims for people that quit. They didn't even like get fired, right? But the unemployment office is so backed up with everything else. Like, they're not coming to save me money, right?
Yeah,
like, and so you are taking care of people. You are going to be responsible for certain aspects of things. And you're also going to be responsible for motivating that individual in some capacity. And for every good hire, there's probably 4 or 5 bad ones. It's all so cliche, right? Like, don't be friends with your employees. Like, hire slow, fire quickly. But that stuff is easy to say. It's hard to actually do. And so I really like the vendor kind of like relationship, finding a few people that you're really tight with, that are freelance people that you like to work on projects with, still have those clear-cut expectations, right? And then when the job's over, the relationship's kind of done, or it's like on like a hiatus. So you don't have to worry, you know, like, oh, I didn't really like what they did on that job. You should communicate that feedback to them, right? But like, it won't damage your friendship or your relationship if you have one with them that you want to maintain. And then that person is more motivated to get work done, to have it done efficiently, to make sure that they do a really good job because they want to work with you again in the future. So you're constantly reselling yourself and kind of invigorating the relationship. Whereas with the employee-employer relationship, it's just different. It's honestly like comparable to being like a parent. It's very interesting.
Yeah,
I would say
that is really interesting. Yeah, that answers a lot of the reasoning of why you're transitioning the gym and whatnot, and why you're structuring this new business the way it is. And that makes a lot of sense. You can keep those friendships and relationships. And like you said, when that project's done, you can still hang out on the weekend with them because it's not awkward. They're kind of on their own.
Exactly.
You know?
Yep.
That's great.
So that is what I've learned.
Yeah. No, but that's huge because I find it, that's where the benefit is from you coming in as a business owner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for sure.
Right. Like I'm that kid. I came in as I've been playing with cameras my whole life. And I just like playing with cameras and like I was very fortunate in the sense of like when I started my company, I was like, hey Dad, here's the company. I'm going to do all the work. You just make sure like it works. You know what I mean? Like, but yeah. So like, you know, for instance, what I've been thinking about over here is like, that hour a week is not just learning filmmaking. That hour a week is learning business. That hour a week could be looked at as just like, yeah, how do you make yourself better? Yeah. You know what I mean? 100%. I think that's super cool. So, would you like to ask the influencer question?
Well, he already answered a lot of that. One of our key questions is, who do you look up to? Who are you crushing on Instagram? You mentioned Peter McKinnon a lot.
I love Peter McKinnon stuff. I just love his style. It's
he's rad.
So moody.
Yeah.
It's great. That's another thing, like light, as you guys know, makes such a crazy difference when you're filming.
Oh gosh.
And I would say that that's probably like my weakest area still, is trying to figure out how to properly light scenes and how to use light, like natural light, in a way where you can kind of control it. Like for the wedding, I bought a bunch of ND filters and I was like, this is the best thing ever. After like starting to do more video. And
did you
like,
get the Peter McKinnon ND filter?
No, I didn't, but I have been getting targeted with those ads and I'm like, I might just get one.
I'm about to buy one. So
yeah,
I'll let you know.
It's in my shopping list. Yeah.
They look sick. But yeah, and like, again, just not being kind of afraid to fail. Who else do I like from a creator standpoint? I don't know if you guys know who he's a photographer. His Instagram handle is KJP. He's from like Mass or Rhode Island, but he just like edits the crap out of his images, but they look like fairy tales, dude. It's insane. I love that stuff. Peter McKinnon's definitely the biggest one. I obviously follow Cerilli Photo. I love all of his work. There's not really anybody else, to be honest. Like, I feel like I just kind of see stuff as I go through, But those are really the people that I stop and look at their work.
Yeah.
Honestly, those two. I'm like, wow, how did he do that? I like it when I look at something, I'm like, how did they do that?
Yeah, but I think it's valuable to kind of have those people, right?
Oh,
because
for sure.
as you said, and it's the same way for me and probably you too, it's like you can see something and recreate it. I'm a monkey see, monkey do kind of guy.
Me
That's
too.
the only reason I'm good at filmmaking.
Yep.
Is literally because I watch stuff and I'm like, oh, I can figure out how to do that.
Yep.
Like every idea is recycled anyway. So I feel not guilty at all by just copying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
you're adding your own take to it.
And that's how it works, though. And that's how it works. And that's what's so fun. And now we've talked so much about business, but I want to ask you from a creative perspective, what is your favorite thing to shoot? Like what is you mentioned you really like doing the promo documentary stuff or whatever.
Yep.
But say there was no business.
Right.
What do you like to shoot?
honestly, and this is something that I haven't had an opportunity to shoot a lot of stuff, but I really love action sports. Like,
dude, let's go shoot some dirt bikes,
dude,
bro.
I'm telling you, I know. So my end goal, I don't even want to call it my end goal, but I want to make like movies one day. I want to be like a legit cinematographer, director, kind of like, this is what we're doing. Cause it's so cool. Like you just tell stories. And the coolest thing about filmmaking and photography and whatever is like, until AI and tech and all this stuff gets to a point where you can just like replay memories in your brain, like that's what it is. You're like documenting and replaying memories, and it's something that you can show people. And like, how cool is it when, you know, you're our age now and you go back and you look at photos from when you're a kid, right? Or your parents show you those things, or you have like home recorded like movies and stuff. And that stuff is so readily available now with like iPhones and everything. Like the kids that are growing up now, like my niece is 7. She's going to know like what she's looked like and like acted like and behaved like since the moment she was born until she like gets to however old she's going to be. And like, that is just, I think, the most insane thing. Like, I'd love to go back and see like videos and stuff of like my parents or whatever. So I would say action sports for sure. I definitely want to make like a really dope edit. I like cinematic video too a lot. I shoot everything at 24, which I'm like wondering if I should get away from, to be honest. I've been toying with the idea of going up to 30, but I like the feel of it. I just think it looks so good. Yeah. And then I would say the other thing that I think would be really cool to film is hunting. I would really love, like, I don't know if you guys have seen the show Meat Eater, but like those kind of like hunting guided things would just be so rad to capture on camera. And like,
interesting. I had a guy reach out to me 2 years ago that wanted to do like a hunting documentary.
Sick.
So
yeah. I think it would be so cool. And like, you could make so much daily content. And then I would say that the third thing is cooking. Cooking would be, I really like to cook. And I think food photography and videography is really dope. And I would love to work with a restaurant at some point.
Yeah.
Interesting. One of my, pipe dreams eventually, like I'd love to create a food, like an agricultural documentary.
Yeah.
And to try to share with the general population of like why food needs to be valued.
Yep.
Way more than it is.
Yeah, that would be so fun. Dude, there's so much, right? Like there's so many cool people around here that know how to do this stuff to some level, and there's plenty of space, right? Like I'm always more about collaborating than I am competing. There's so many clients, and we live in like a pretty ridiculous country from like a money spending standpoint. Like you can find businesses and cool stuff to do. You just have to be willing to like put yourself out there and go get it. But I would love to do like a passion project, like kind of year in the life or something like that. Would be really, really rad. And then I also like it's a lot easier, I think, to document over create, right? And this is something that Amy like I really want to do with her because she's a wonderful copywriter. She likes script writing and all those things. Like, how challenging would it be to put together a video where you're not just documenting like cool shit that people are doing, but like you actually have to create the scenes and like get actors or like, hey, this is what I'm looking for and this is the mood, and I'm just so interested. Like I can't even watch a show on Netflix anymore and be like, oh my God, that was great. Loved how that was shot or like what they did or whatever. I'm like starting to get pretty obsessed with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
It's funny because you went to school for like you went to med school.
Yeah, essentially.
And this seems to be the direction you want to go.
I just don't like the box it puts you in. There's in medicine, there's one way to do things until there's not, and then there's new research that comes out and you change it. But with filming, there's obviously like fundamentals and foundations of how to do things to make things look a certain way, but you can always capture something different and tell a different story every time. Like I always have so much fun editing. And I'll show you guys this video after this landscaping video that I made, but it makes it like, I filmed, I was there for the whole day, filmed all day long. I got to make like this really cool kind of like hype video hiring advertisement for them. And they sent it out to the team. Everybody loved it. And the employees are stoked. It like gives them like a sense of pride. And I think that's what everybody feels when you make something that's really cool, or you're on the other side of the camera dirt biking or whatever. You're like, that was rad. Like,
yeah.
So it gives you a feeling. It's not like the product of making a video or whatever, but it's the emotion kind of tied to it, which I love that idea around like the agriculture stuff. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah. Dude, isn't that like so cool? So I told this story. Andy and I did a podcast for each other just to kind of like get back in the groove of this thing. And I told this story, but I'm going to tell it again. I just went and made this, like I've been doing nonstop. I've been full throttle on company videos, if you will, for like 2 years.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And I went out and made this fall drone video, which is the most cliche thing you can do living in Vermont.
I know.
And it brought the fun back into filmmaking, because I got to do this, widescreen cinematic music. And I remember I sent it to like 3 people, and like the first response I got back before I like release it was like, wow, I like cried at the end.
Yeah.
And I was like, how freaking cool is that?
Yeah,
like we
dude.
get to be able to like, oh, I love that. I just love that part of filmmaking.
Yeah, when I released it and I sent it over, the sales director at Pinnacle Properties called me. He was like, I just wanted to call you and tell me that like your video gave me chills, and I am like so stoked on it. He's like, I can't stop watching it. And like that feels really good. Like that validation is so nice. Like to your point where you get that email back and you're like, oh my God, I love that. Like I love feeling that. And you get that a little bit too from medicine when you fix somebody. But there are a lot of things like, I think the toughest part for me with training and AT work and stuff is so much of it depends on the individual that you're working with and how much work they're going to put into it. You're not going to get better if you're not going to do your home exercise plan. You're not going to lose weight by coming and training 3 times a week for an hour, because there's 165 other hours in the week where you're stuffing your face with whatever it is. And so like, and then people like shit on you because they're like, I'm not losing weight, it's your fault. It's like, that sucks. Whereas like when you're in total control, when you're making stuff and you put it together and you release it to the world, and you can be like super proud of it, and it doesn't rely on someone else's success for you to be successful, if you will. So I think that that's a really big thing for me. I know emotionally and having longevity in an industry.
Yeah. Yeah. You have anywhere else to go, Andy?
I do. I jotted down some real technical questions as we were going along. Where do you get your audio?
Artlist and Motion Array. I use both of them.
Oh, interesting. I don't use either of those.
Oh, they're fucking great. They're really good.
Okay.
Noted. Yeah.
Noted. I get a lot of Artlist ads.
It's really good.
YouTubers, but
I like Motion Array more than Artlist.
For music?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I just find they just have a bigger database, I think, than Artlist. So that's my answer to that question. Sometimes if I can't find like a certain sound effect, I'll go on YouTube and just like type in whatever effect I'm looking for, and I'll just download the MP3 file from a YouTube video.
Oh, I always do that.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing. I don't know if you know this. Adobe, you kind of dig for it on their website, but Adobe has a massive free library of Foley.
Oh wow, I did not
Free
know
library?
Free library of Foley. It is epic. I'll show
Sick.
you when we're done.
Yeah.
Okay.
I use it
Sick.
all the time.
Okay.
All the time.
Cool.
It's great.
That's good to know.
Do you charge for mileage, or how do you work travel into your pricing?
I charge $1 a mile, but I don't charge as frequently as I should.
Yeah, so I was going to say, is that like everything in town and your Connecticut
so
trips?
We have a 10-mile radius, and then the reason I charge $1 is for that 55 cents a mile, but then I charge the full $1 because of the opportunity cost of it, because I can't work on other projects while I'm driving around. So if I'm out, basically if you're like, I'm a softie. I have a hard time charging like nickel and diming people. So if it's like in Chittenden County, like I'm not charging.
Yeah.
But anything like further, and I make sure that I tell people, I'm like, just so you know, if you want me to drive down to Castleton, Vermont, it's going to be $1 a mile. It's like 100 miles either way. You're going to charge me. I'm going to charge you $200. I also drive a freaking giant Dodge Ram that now costs $80 to fill up.
Dude,
I'm like, dude, what the?
Yeah,
so like, I'm just like, I don't know if I can drive this like the way that I've been driving it anymore. I'm going to drive around in a Prius. But yeah, no, I charge for the mileage reimbursement and then the opportunity loss because I can't do editing or whatever. And like I said, my schedule is like stacked up. So
opportunity loss is a very interesting way to think about it.
Yeah.
Because I charge like the 57 cents a mile.
Yep.
But I also charge my hourly rate.
Oh, you do?
While I'm driving, yeah.
Yep.
That goes into it.
That's smart. If you can get away with that, that's awesome. But
you can't always.
Yes, for sure. So like I just do that dollar amount. It seems to work out nicely.
Well, my issue is when I'm doing trips that are 9 hours away and they don't want to pay for a plane ticket.
Yeah.
That's where things get hairy because I don't charge them a full day of work of driving, even though I should because I can't do anything when I'm driving. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So that's a good way to think about it.
Yep.
You know, AJ will have a discussion here with the next.
He's not gonna like that very much.
You said you block 2 hours a week to learning, which is phenomenal. And I've done similar things of trying to block time on my schedule to update a website for work or just get caught up on email. But I find myself constantly being like, oh, there's an opportunity for something else to come up. Is it just self-discipline that you hold that time on your calendar, or how do you
pretty much
that?
So if I need to move something, I have a rule that is nothing gets deleted from my calendar, it just gets moved. So if I have a project that comes up, it means that I've got to work late that night, or I've got to get up earlier the next morning, or I have to work on the weekend, or I've got to sit down. And like the thing about learning is you can kind of do it at any time that you're feeling relatively motivated to do so. And it's easy enough to just like go sit on the back deck and like throw some headphones in and watch a Skillshare on my phone while you're like sitting in the sun. You know what I mean? Especially if you're learning about stuff that's interesting to you. But I try to structure like my learning stuff based on like what I had questions on or challenges with that week, or something that I saw in a video that I want to try to learn. And I've also recognized that asking the right questions in Google is like super important. Like, cause if you don't know, like folly, for example, like if you don't know terms, you don't really know how to find the answers to certain questions that you have. So for me, it's been educating myself on like vocabulary and things of that nature so that you can ask the right questions so that you can learn the right information in an efficient way.
Foley, background music, sound effects, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So on that, how are you educating yourself on keeping up with social trends? Right at the beginning, we talked about how rapidly Instagram and everything is changing. How are you staying on that?
So Morning Brew is something that we subscribe to, and I'll try to read those as much as I can. But usually I'm just going on YouTube and looking at creators. Amy has a couple accounts that she really likes to follow. But you can be educated a lot too, just on Instagram and Facebook. Like if you follow those people that will give you those updates. There's an account on Instagram. I'm blanking on the name. But it's a couple and they own like a social media management company, and every week they do like a weekly update. Oh, do you know who I'm talking about?
Jason and Caroline Zook?
Maybe. I gotta find it. I gotta find it. No, I don't. I just know that they're a couple, and I just see their content go through. But they do a lot of those slider carousels where they're like, it's like your thumbnail, and then it's just like stacked information. But yeah, dude, that is like tough. You almost need to have like a freaking full-time like R&D person because it changes so rapidly. It's like every 3 days.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I don't want to go down a giant rabbit hole with this question, but I am curious. You said nothing gets deleted out of your calendar. It just gets moved. Do you have a hard time balancing that work life to normal life?
Yeah, dude.
Like,
it's
okay.
kind of it's like
it's kind of an issue. Yeah.
It is kind of an issue. So I also have like wicked anxiety. So that's another thing. Mental health, super important to me. I talk to my doctor all the time. I recently just got put on Prozac for my anxiety, because my anxiety gets to the point, and I go see a therapist every single week, and I talk to, and Amy and I go to see a therapist together more proactively than reactively. But I've had a lot of issues throughout the course of my life with like mental health stuff. And so to your point, like I'm a perfectionist. I'm like almost OCD about certain things, like, and that anxiety, right? If it gets to a certain point, you just start to spiral, right? Like one bad thing happens to you that day and you just like go down this like rabbit hole of just like everything sucks. It's like, so being able to like manage that stuff with exercise, therapy, meditation, all of those things is really important. And I put in my calendar breaks, intentional breaks, where I'm like, this is the time that I've got to break. And just like that discipline, it's like, so for me, now I've got to get this over to my to-do list type of thing, where it's like, I need to not add to my to-do list until I have like a certain number of things checked off. And so I've been really aware and paying attention to practicing saying no more, instead of being like, yeah, no, I can do that. For sure, I can do that. Because when you do that all of the time, right, you end up never feeling like you're actually good at anything, because you're just constantly trying to learn how to do something. It's really high stress because you don't want to screw it up. You kind of have this like imposter syndrome around being like, I don't know how to make animation, but like I got to figure it out. So like for me, it's been recognizing those things in a new industry, right? Which I had like totally managed the concept, but this world is totally different. So that's what I would say about that, is just paying attention to the things that have stressed me out, projects that have stressed me out, personality types or people that have stressed me out, or companies, or like, you know, it's equally as important to know what you like as the things that you don't like. So yeah, it's kind of how I go about that.
Yeah.
What are you using for a to-do list? Do you just pen and paper?
Google Keep.
Google Keep.
I love Google Keep. It's got little check boxes. I get that dopamine hit from checking things off the list.
I love that.
One thing I wanted to loop back on was pandemic hit. You decided to take your media production in-house for the gym. How did you keep clients engaged? Was it just through social media, or were you like emailing your existing customers?
It was social. It was it was definitely email. A lot of phone conversations. Just trying to keep people informed and involved on a regular basis. So yeah, we were posting every day. We were sending out like an email update a week. And then it was also just like put into the hands of the coaches to make sure that they were communicating. And then it was my responsibility to make sure I was communicating with them. It was really tough, just that part, because like not only is like everything in the world going crazy, there's like this, you know, people don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how deadly this virus is. Like I remember the first like month was just like, dude, it's terrifying for like everybody. And you're like, I don't know if I'm ever going to work again. And like, how is this going to happen? And you're kind of panicking. So for me, it was just trying to keep people as informed as possible. And people got frustrated, right? Because you change your mind every other day. Because you're like, well, I have new information that I didn't have yesterday. And I think that's something that not just like business owners can relate to, like everybody in the world. Because you have like the government saying one thing, your school system saying one thing, your kids are saying one thing, your parents are saying another thing. It's like, oh my God, it's crazy.
How do you find your clients?
Referrals pretty much exclusively. When I first started, it was all gym clients. So people that I had good relationships there that knew what I could do, right? Because it's not like I had a portfolio or anything. I just had concept. I was like, hey, this is like what I did for concept and what I can do for you. And now we like just got to the point within the past few months where we're getting clients that I've never met before, and people that we're working with that are totally new and doing a good job with, which is cool. it's also really allowed me to set a boundary, because these new clients are seeing me as a creator and somebody that owns a media company, whereas the original clients still see me as a personal trainer and a gym owner that's running around with a camera. So it's just a very different dynamic, I would say. But yeah, it's all been referral based, which is cool. Friends and family, and primarily just like the clients that we have who have relationships with other people. They're like, the beauty of running people's social, which I'll say to you, is that your content gets put in front of way more people and way more networks. And when somebody who doesn't have a good social all of a sudden does, people are like, who's doing this for you? And then they say it, and then I get a phone call, and it's like the best form of advertising. I don't need to post on Instagram. I should. Like,
right. Yeah. You don't need to populate outsource.
But I just don't have the time, really. Like, one of the things I'd really love to do in the future, like to your point about like content stuff, is get to a point in this business where I can just focus on making content for outsource. And like going and filming somebody else, you know what I mean? Like,
dude, you're
yep.
Yep. Oh, I know, dude. I know.
So that's
dude, something that I'm doing with AJ right now is like, what's so cool about what happened with AJ is he's an influencer guy, right? And that helped me grow significantly.
Big time.
Like, and I was very intentional with like, I'm not going to show up in your videos. Like when we first started like doing Supercross and stuff, I'm like, I'm not going to show up. I'm going to keep my mouth shut, all this stuff. And that has helped so much in all other assets of the business, just because I was running all of his stuff. You know what I mean? It's pretty incredible how all of that kind of works.
Yeah, dude, that's how it goes. And it snowballs, right? Like, business is, there's a tipping point, right? And where you just like, you kind of bang your head against the wall for a really long time. You don't see results. And then all of a sudden you like hit that tipping point. And it just goes like exponentially, but you have to break through that like initial glass ceiling. And then there's another one that you get to, which we got to with concept, right? Like there's that initial one, which is like where you are right now, where you're like a solopreneur doing your thing, starting to get recognition. People want to work with you. You're trying to figure out how you're going to balance that, which I'm now going through for my second time with outsource, which is cool. And then you make that leap, right? Which grows substantially because now you are essentially replicating yourself. And so you're like, cool, how are we going to do this? And then you get to a point where your systems like break again, where you're like, oh, the stuff we were doing with 4 people does not work with 20 people. Like, so I think it's, you know, we would do it annually where we would look back at certain things, and you have to recognize like when your systems start to break, and it could be from a communication standpoint. It could be an administrative standpoint, like could be your schedule, your calendar needs to change and fluctuate. So it's kind of noticing that stuff. But yeah, it is cool. Like just business is fun. It's so fun. Is.
And you can be creative in business, which that's what I've like kind of fell in love with because I worked for a local production company for 3 years, I think, a couple years in high school, full-time for a year. And then I left to go and do my own thing. And I just fell in love with the business aspect. And I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but I'm having a great time doing it. You know what I mean? Because you can be creative. You can try. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, because you don't have somebody else like that's kind of overseeing you, and you're also on your own dollar. So like your risk that you're taking, like it's on you. It's nobody to blame.
Well, that's the thing for me is like I don't know what the word is. I respect you, I guess, for doing this because I started my company when I was 18. Mm-hmm. I had no risk.
Right.
I was like, I'm still living at home. I can just I can start a company and not make any money for a couple years and it wouldn't matter. You, however, were in a very different position and still took that risk. And I always find those stories really cool because I often think I'm like, man, one day I'm not going to be able to take risks anymore because I'm going to be too old and have too many responsibilities. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, so there are a lot of different factors that allowed me to get to where I am. And I think that everybody has those types of things. Like for you, for example, you're just taking advantage of an opportunity of living at home and saving money and doing all of those things. Like there are certain risks. I would just say that for people in general, from like a business standpoint, you have to put yourself in a position where you can mitigate as much risk as possible. When I started Concept, so I'll give you an example. I am fortunate and privileged, right? In that when I was 23 years old, I was sitting in a gym and I was talking to my aunt and uncle, bitching about the fact that I could not find a house or an apartment that would allow me to get a dog. My aunt and uncle are very gracious people who, out of fucking nowhere, they were like, we'll buy you a house. And I'm like, what is that? What are you talking about? You're going to buy me a house? And they're like, no, we invest in real estate all the time. We're going to buy you a house. And then when you go to sell that house or you want to refinance that house, we get back our initial investment plus interest. And that's not something that happens to people, right? And I think about that moment all the time. So it's like that happened, buy my house. And then the second thing that happened is I tell Nate I'm quitting and he says, I'm going to pay you $1,000 a month to come train me at my house. Yeah. That doesn't happen to people usually when they leave jobs either. But I was able to capitalize on those things. I have always kind of felt indebted to my aunt and uncle for allowing me to do that because that allowed me to train people out of my basement, right? And I had 5 roommates, so I wasn't paying a mortgage.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
So I'm able, and so I think it's more so about being like, all right, what are the opportunities that I have and how do I take advantage of those things? Whereas I could have just been a degenerate and taken this, wasted all the money, destroyed the house, not taking advantage of it. But I've done a bunch of DIY projects on that place. We're upfitting it. We're going to try to rent it out one day. And then we're going to do a cash out refi and I'll go buy a house with my uncle instead of him buying it for me. Right. So and I'm just really lucky that they've trusted me with that stuff. But at the end of the day, if you just work hard, I just work hard and you'll get there. I've also experienced now losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Running a business through a pandemic and being like, well, this sucks.
Yeah, right.
This doesn't feel like a good opportunity or anything like that. And then starting a media company to save that other company because I can charge way more, right? And keeping my expenses at home down as low as I can. I mean, I was siphoning tens of thousands of dollars a month from this little media company into a gym business. And eventually it just got to the point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. So we made a model change and a system change and now things are kind of coming up and out. But yeah, I would say it's just you got to work hard and you got to take advantage of your opportunities and don't be afraid to take risks, as stressful as that sounds. But you like wouldn't be where you are now if you didn't do a good job, right? Like you could say like, oh, I own a business and I work at home, but like you're clearly like successful and you work with big time clients, and it's cool. I wouldn't feel like ashamed about it at all. So now for me, my next best big thing, right? Like when we talk about a risk standpoint, I gotta like get myself to a certain spot before we like have kids. Cause that's like a whole nother kind of ordeal where it's like, no, I'm not gonna choose to lose money with this business and make money over here and move this over. Like if we had kids, I would have just closed the gym, you know what I mean? And probably just like gotten a job, but I don't.
Yeah.
So it's great. Life is just crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, huh?
It's like, and you just never know like what stone's going to unturn. Like you get a call from AJ today being like, hey, like X Games wants to hire you as like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like whatever it is.
Or you could call and say, hey, I don't want to work with you anymore.
Yeah.
You never know, you know what I mean?
For sure. So that's the cool thing about being an entrepreneur is like, it's kind of in your own hands a lot more than being an employee anyways.
Yep.
If you want to take a day off because you need a break, you can. And if you want to work 70 hours a week and then reap the rewards of what that brings for you down the road, you can.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, my whole thing, and like, even with the anxiety piece, like, I have to go ride once a week, but I can choose to do that.
Yeah.
I can protect a day and go do that. I'm
so
Thursday
thankful afternoon.
For that. I'm so thankful for that. That's huge. Like, I wouldn't trade that for anything.
Yeah. I miss it.
We'll get you back.
I know. That's been the toughest thing for me probably this year as far as like my biggest struggle. It's like I don't have an outlet right now because I can't snowboard this winter. And then dirt biking was just like, dude, I just love it.
Dude, that's the best way to get away from work.
Oh my God.
I feel like for me anyway,
It's so
it's
fun.
just so like, oh
Yeah.
Well, snowmobiling's the next best thing.
I know.
So let's keep talking.
I'm gonna do it.
snowmobiling is great too. That's a good deal. All right, I'm satisfied. Are you satisfied, Andy?
I think so. Last question is how can people find and follow you?
So website's www.outsource-creative.com. And then I think my Instagram handle is outsource.creative.
Something close to that.
Yeah, something like that. And then my personal account is just Lucas Zelazny. So at Lucas Zelazny. Find me on Instagram, Facebook. You could find me through any one of these other companies that we work with if you dig hard enough. I put our little thing at the bottom of all our websites.
There you go.
But yeah, I mean, I'd love to work with anybody, whether it's other creators. I'd love to learn and be a second shooter for people, or be a primary and take on other people because I need help with certain gigs. And then obviously just working with business clients. And if you have a passion project that you want to work on that I find interesting, I'd love to shoot it for free.
Dude, that's a great outlook, bro. Well, hey, I appreciate it. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I had a good time with you guys.
Right on.
Thanks.